doing this material, pay attention to the key words, the key ideas, big terms, things like that. That's really, really what we are going to be looking at. So, as you guys may or may not know, except for the final exam, your test, which will be happening not this week, obviously, but next week, is the last test. You guys will have probably one more quiz, but it is the last test. We're kind of wrapping up. So, and as you guys probably have noticed, I forgot to give you guys a map of Asia. So we're just not going to do it. The next test we're going to have is basically going to be 30 multiple choice questions, and that's it. So it'll work out. It'll be fine. Actually, it's easier for me to make the final exam that way because it gives me more questions. So it'll be good. In the meantime, let's have a look at some of these things. So the first thing I want to point out to you guys is we've been studying Asia as a region. And we're actually going to start with Russia, believe it or not. Because we kind of haven't talked too much about Russia at this point. And partially that is because Russia is so similar in the east side to Central Asia and pretty similar to Europe in the west. So we're really going to focus on its key differences. And the main thing to understand is the blend of these cultural elements is unique to Russia. So, for instance, if you look at Russia's system of government, it is actually more common to Germany's than any place else, and that is because it was originally based upon the German system. It's different than, say, like the French system and different than the English system. So that's kind of the unique thing to Russia, but also in that it was based kind of similarly on the idea of a kind of multicultural empire. You know, Russia's history is kind of unique because it originally was settled by Vikings, Kiev and Rus, and then from there had immigration from all these other different places. So it has a blending of all these different types of things, like St. Basil's Cathedral, that one that looks kind of like the palace in Agrabah in Aladdin. It's like, you know, they got the minarets and the big onion domes and all that sort of stuff. And yet, structurally, the rest of it's European because, again, it's a blending of these two cultural elements. And also, if you look at physical geography, how they adapted to it, you can see how, like, kind of the different areas, them both impacting the physical environment and also reacting to it. The first thing understandable is that the western side of Russia is the most popular. This area over here on the other side of the Ural Mountains. That's because it is the greenest area, it's the most suitable for land. It's pretty cold in the north. Farther south, you get into a little bit more moderate climates, but suffice it to say, it is bare dense. It's an area, it's basically the breadbasket of Russia. Now, it's the west. Now, the eastern part is where you start to get pretty barren. The weather is pretty brutal there. And that's actually due to a phenomenon called continentiality. It's spelled like continentiality. That means that the continent is so large that the wind that would normally be coming off the ocean doesn't reach the center. It doesn't. Its size is so large that the weather is different because of that. This area in the east, Siberia, is pretty much a unhospitable mess. People don't really want to live here at all possible, which is why, for a lot of Russian history, it was popular to send troublemakers here. Vladimir Lenin, whenever he was banished by the government, was sent to Siberia because of the massive, basically it's ice and fingers. It does have one of the largest forests in the world, the Amur forest, but beyond that, with ficus, usually ficus forest. But other than that, it's not much to really go to. And so what happened was when Russia became a big continent, it had actually been explored by a dude named Titus Bering. The Bering Sea is named after. And essentially, people started settling on the East Coast, and they had all the settlement on the West Coast. There was nothing really in between. So they built a giant freaking railroad that went right through the middle of it, trying to connect these two land areas. So again, human-environment interaction. As far as Central Asia is concerned, most people have adapted to this place by, frankly, nomadism, moving from place to place. There are certain cities in Central Asia where you have settlements like Ulaanbaatar, and you've got, actually, I don't know how to pronounce that word, it's the capital of Kazakhstan, and then these other little cities here and there. But for the most part, it's pretty spread out. And so people migrate from place to place. And this is largely because they're wide grasslands. It's just grass as far as the eye can see. And that's really bad for sustaining human life. Think about it. Can you eat grass? Can you eat grass? Well, kind of, we can. A variety of grass, a derivative grass, a genetically altered grass, which is, of course, wheat, things like that. But that doesn't really grow really well there. Instead, you have to rely on other means to get your food. So if you have a bunch of grass, how do you survive? How do you eat? What do you get? Exactly. You can herd animals, and you can get all kinds of great stuff from animals. You can get felts, from their fur and their wool and things like that. You can make cloth, so you can have shelter and clothing. You can eat their meats if you're really desperate, but really that's not an efficient way of managing the animal, because once the animal is gone, as opposed to milking and having cheese and things like that. So there's all kinds of wonderful things you can do with animals. But you still kind of need grains, don't you? And so these settlements were set up in areas that were particularly good for farming and the nomads of trade. And what happens is they still connect with these cities to this day. For instance, Mongols, they have modern lifestyle. There's big oil fish in Mongolia and places like that. But you also have these folks who still live from place to place like they always have on horseback. And it's really kind of interesting to see that. You see the same sort of thing like the Arabian deserts, places where you don't have a lot of raw materials to work with, and so you spread out. That's really the important thing to understand when it comes to populations, is that the physical geography pretty much dictates how many people can live there, what population density is. Because if there's not enough resources to survive, then people die. So they spread out or concentrate if there's a particularly rich environment there. So if you look at India, the southern part of Asia, India is incredibly varied. They've got the Indus and the Ganges rivers. They create this delta that we have all this wonderful farmland. So that area is very, very settled. And then on the west coast, you have all these settlements as well, taking advantage of trade and things like that. The central part of the area, a little bit less because it's desert, and again, the physical geography forming human responses. East Coast, in terms of China, most folks live on the East Coast. There's fewer folks really throughout the rest of the country. I mean, we think about China as being this massive place, but if you think about it, we've got deserts, we've got mountains, we've got all this stuff that gets in the way, not to mention rainforests. So, I mean, yes, they can settle different places, but they're kind of limited to where they can go. Agriculturally speaking, again, we're along rivers like Changjiang and but the problem with that is flooding. Essentially, monsoon season causes these rivers to grow exponentially. And so the way people have traditionally dealt with this is trying to watch for signs and move out of the way whenever things get bad. That's really hard to predict when people die. So the Three Gorges Dam was built not only for the purpose of harnessing hydroelectric power, but also for the purpose of controlling this flooding. And by the way, it's still a problem. Even with that dam, there's still flooding every now and again that results in loss of human life. Not to mention, Three Gorges. It's in another section in your notes, if you don't think that was simple. But the other thing that we don't think about sometimes is the massive amount of tectonic activity. Remember, this is the Pacific Ring of Fire right along here on the East Coast. So problems with things like tsunamis, earthquakes, which there was just one not too long ago. What was it? Well, trying to, it was 8.3 or something, 7.8, something like that. 7.6, thank you. So, I mean, this is another major problem. And so when we talk about construction, in modern construction, things like that, there's a big push for making buildings that are able to resist damage from things like this. Not to mention the hunger for electric power. I mean, if you think about it, how much do we rely on electricity? I mean, right? I mean, it is incredibly important to this life that we are living. I mean, we have homes that only rely on electricity, no other form of energy, and that's a big problem when the power goes out, So we need to have reliable energy. How do we rely on energy? What do we use mostly in this area of the world, in the United States? Well, it's kind of depends on where you are, but yeah, we particularly rely on coal, sure, burning coal and creating energy, right? So, what about Asia? In some cases, less time wind. We don't really have a lot of areas for wind. So they've talked about actually in some of these areas, like Mongolia, places like that. And not as much nuclear is one that's become a big option. And nuclear power makes people very nervous, I find, which is kind of funny. What's that? Why? That's fair. I mean, just the name nuclear is like, ooh, it's spooky, What's funny is how nuclear power works is actually kind of old-fashioned. Essentially, you're using a nuclear reaction to heat water to make steam by steam. That's what it is. And what's that? There's actually quite a few places in the States that there's actually different kinds of nuclear power, like thorium and other types of materials. But the thing that makes people nervous is nuclear meltdown. Things going catastrophically bad, which is like, what happened in Fukushima in Japan. But the thing of it is that tends to be kind of rare. Like, I can think right offhand maybe that's happening 4 times. And I think we get the idea that, like, when a nuclear meltdown happens, that it explodes like a bomb. That's not really true. It's not what happens. The biggest problem is radioactive material getting out, which, can kill people, which is problematic, as you can imagine. But the nice thing is that if it runs correctly, then it produces a crap ton of energy, and the only byproduct is water. So it's not really that bad a thing if it works properly. If it doesn't work properly, you die. So that's kind of a scary thing. But again, we face a very real problem in the world, and that is we need more electricity. We need more and more and more and more. And if we're going to advance and continue to develop technology, this hunger for energy is only going to grow unless we come up with some crazy technology that uses less power, which we probably will to some extent. Efficiency is what we're kind of aiming for, but still, we need more. And finding solutions for this, is one of the things that China is dealing with, as well as Japan, as they continue to develop. In any case, let's talk about some modern issues. Okay, so we have a lot of industrialization, as you guys know. Industrialization is one of the things that makes the economy of the world go round. We've talked about this before. With the development of machines doing the work of animals and people, we can produce way more stuff at a more efficient rate for a cheaper price, so it makes it more widespread. If you think about it, this drives prices down. Plus, as technology improves, things continue to develop. However, industrialization has a side effect that you should know. I present to you Beijing, China. The picture on the left is Beijing during the monsoon season when the winds are blowing all the pollution out of town. The picture on the right is Beijing the rest of the time. Yeah, it's a problem. Now, there's a couple solutions to this. One solution is developing greener technologies. However, that is more expensive. And China is really heavily relying on manufacturing and cheap labor. The big problem is as they transition from a manufacturing economy into a post-industrial economy like we have, they run into the problem of developing, and that's a long-term approach to things. And it's kind of an interesting world to think about. Where are we going to be when people are all trying to get to a post-industrial economy? Everyone can't do that. Somebody has to go get raw materials and take robots to do it, which is certainly a possibility. And actually, it'd be kind of great because then you don't have to worry about miners and a dangerous field of hard back-breaking labor. But then again, you got a question of replacing people's jobs, and it's a difficult solution. But pollution is having negative health effects, and increases in things like cancers, birth defects, all kinds of problems. And so, even with this solution, it's kind of something they're going to have to do. But at the same token, they want to promote, their economy. So it's kind of a catch-22. Another major health concern in Southeast Asia, in particular, is HIV/AIDS. South and Southeast Asia. It's the second largest pandemic of it in the world. Although it's debatable, I suppose, whether we can consider this a pandemic status. It still is a significant problem. Again, a lot of the same problems we see within Asia in terms of lack of education and lack of knowledge, lack of testing, all these other same problems. So I just wanted to point out that this is a major problem. Moving on. Let's talk about conflict zones. This area in between Pakistan and India, Kashmir and Jammu, have been fought over since the founding of those two countries. And basically, both sides claim it. India and Pakistan both claim it's theirs. And even just recently there was fighting in this area. Yeah.
Where do they claim what's called the
Kashmir, Kashmir. In fact, you'll see on this map, it's actually the border is a dotted line. We also have this channel, which is, again, the thing of it is that these territories that are lucrative. They're lucrative producers of materials, and they're rich in natural resources, and so both sides want them. So they've been fighting over it. And again, it's kind of a scary situation. Although admittedly this border is not quite as hot as others in the area right now, but it's scary because both India and Pakistan are nuclear weapons. So there's always that fear of what if that conflict goes to the point where they start flinging nukes at each other. But another one is the Gaza Strip between Palestine and Israel. Basically, this is a contested area. Israel has been moving in people from their country and basically settling them there and kicking out Palestinians. The Palestinians have responded with outcries of evil criticism and terrorist attacks. This, I believe, was a picture taken 2 years ago. A rocket attack going against Israel. And, it's one of those,
Where Palestine and Israel fighting over?
The Gaza Strip. Gaza, yeah. Gaza. And, it's interesting because this conflict is, going on between these two places. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is responding in different ways. A lot of Israel's allies, the U.S. included, have sort of criticized them for this action, but still support them. And Israel is basically being threatened by its neighbors, including Iran and like Syria and places like that, with extermination, basically saying we're going to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And so it's this sort of, again, dicey situation. We're very nervous of it because, again, Israel's kind of one of our biggest allies in the Middle East. If we let them fall or let something happen to them, then we've got all kinds of other problems in the Middle East. So, on one hand, we want to support Israel, on the other hand, Israel's kind of making cards for them. So, it's kind of an interesting situation. Let's talk income inequality in India. So first of all, what is income inequality? It's the unequal distribution of wealth in society. So what does that mean? Well, basically that a significant number of the percentage of the wealth is concentrated at the top. In this case, you'll see the breakdown basically of the wealth in the country. And I forget exactly what these numbers mean, but basically what it's saying is that in this, you have 16 million members of the population in what we call rich, 160 million in what we call the middle class, 359 million in the aspirers, and then the deprived class is 684 million.
Aren't we in a caste system?
Yes, technically, but not really. Hypothetically, culturally, you have this, but no one really acknowledges it except in the rural areas. And the rural areas, they are dead serious about it. Like, I've read stories about a guy and a girl who got married out of caste and fled the country and were gone for like 20 or 30 years and came back to visit like somebody's parents, and then a mob got hold of them and murdered them both like 30 years later because they broke the caste. So I mean, it's still a big deal in some of these areas, but it tends to be more rural, and it is a major problem in India because, you know, how are they supposed to work with, like, the United States, for instance? Like, how are we supposed to trade with somebody that lets that happen, you know? We do. We kind of deal with it, but at the same time, we're kind of uneasy about it. Yeah.
What's caste again?
Caste is basically a rigid hierarchy, meaning that...
Oh, yeah. I get it.
So, like, we're in the United States in a non-rigid or flexible hierarchy based upon wealth, or their countries are. So, let's talk about wealth distribution here. So, basically, a majority of the wealth is here. I think it's something like 80 or 95% of the wealth is at the top. Okay. And then less down from there. Now, why this is problematic for an economy? Okay, an economy relies heavily on people spending money. Essentially, consumers buy goods, and then that money goes into a business, which they then use to produce work, essentially. They hire workers to produce their goods so they can sell it, and it's just a positive feedback loop. The more they sell, the more workers they need, the more money goes out to the workers, who then reinvest that into the economy, and everything goes forward. Now, if we look at a top-heavy model where most of the money is in the rich people generally don't spend that much money. As of all. I mean, numerically, yeah, they spend a portion, but as a percentage of their wealth, we're not talking about all that much. If you think about it, wealthy people are wealthy for a reason, because they invest their money and they make more money with it. They don't spend it on stuff. You know, there's only so many houses that wealthy people really want to buy. You know, think of it this way. Let's say that we made you wealthy right now. Money was no longer an object. You could buy whatever you wanted. What would you do?
TV.
I mean, you could buy anything you want, yeah?
Yeah, I would go.
And you probably have fun for a little while, yeah, buying all the stuff you wanted, and then you'd eventually get bored. Eventually, because if you think about it, the reason stuff has value is because we assign value to it. A lot of the times, we really, really want something because we can't have it. And let's say there's something I'm going to save for. I'm going to save, you're fantasizing about that day you can have it. You're really excited. The day comes, you get it, and you're kind of disappointed. Like, it's cool, but it's nowhere near as neat as you were making it out to be in your head, you know? You're slightly disappointed, right? Now, let me put it to you this way. If you're wealthy enough, that is everything. Everything is within your means. So literally nothing, you don't even worry about price. Price is irrelevant because you can afford it. Okay? So at that point, value is solely based upon what you're feeling at that particular moment. If you're feeling like a nasty taco from Taco Bell, that has at that moment more value to you than a 5-star lobster steak wonderful meal with all the fixings. You know, it doesn't matter to you what you want right now. See what I'm saying?
Save it for $100.
Sure, but money to you doesn't matter. See what I'm saying? It's like, the thing of it is, when you talk about percentages of, like, experience, I forget what exactly it was. I saw someone was like, you know, buying a house, like $200,000 house for someone that's in the top 1% of our society. To them, that's like spending 50 cents. It's like, if you lost 50 cents, it's like, yeah, whatever. And if the house burns down, who cares? Yeah, that's perspective of wealth. It's percentages. It's how you see it. It is no way. Whatever. Yeah, there are problems with being that wealthy, for sure. One of the biggest problems, no, taxes. The amount of, yes, you're absolutely right. Kidnapping is one of the number one fears of people like that because people always want to kidnap. There's a reason they hire bodyguards. So people are trying to kidnap them all the time and hold them for ransom. Yeah, absolutely true. Another major problem is how can you trust anyone?
Like, I worry about celebrities, like, whenever they get together and break up things, you know, whatever, like, maybe, possibly, it's gonna be hard to find someone.
Yeah. Finding someone who can treat them like a person is very hard. You know, the thing of it is that like I've seen all these things talking about people who are friends with people who are incredibly wealthy and what it's like, and it's like it's a weird relationship dynamic because people who are really friends with them don't even think about money, they don't talk about money, they're just friends with the person. And the thing of it is the person might be like, hey, you want to go to like Hawaii this weekend? And the person will be like, I can't do that. I can't afford that. And I go, oh. You know, and it's kind of awkward a little bit because, you know, on one hand, the rich person can pay for them to do it, and sometimes they do because, well, I just want you there, so whatever, I'll pay for it, and things like that. But also, it kind of makes everyone feel a little awkward. You know, money differential, so there's that. Plus, how can you really acknowledge somebody like that? It's sort of like someone marrying someone who's like 20 years younger than them. What are they going to have in common?
Money.
It is very people.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, so with Heineken. Well, Mr. Heineken, he was kidnapped. Or it's Monday.
He was?
Yep. It was a while ago. My parents and I watched something about it. He was kidnapped and they tried to get all like a bunch of money from him. So he contacted these company people through them and he said, just give them what they want, give them the money. And so they got the money and then they found out where they were, but they buried the money somewhere. They did it and it's never been found. It's one of the most successful like brands.
So, I mean, going back to the original point of this, those type of folks aren't spending a lot of money, so they're not actually driving the economy. A lot of times they might own businesses, but saying they're creating wealth is really not true. What they are doing is they're participating in the market just like we do. We're, instead of, you know, us going and selling our labor for money, they're on the opposite of the spectrum. So they're tied into it just like we are, but they're not buying as much stuff, if that makes sense. Middle class spends a lot of money. Like most expenditures are actually in the middle class region. And the reason for that is because we want to appear wealthier than we are. If you think about it, someone who is middle class has all their basic needs met with what their wealth is, but they want to appear wealthier than they actually are. So they tend to get in trouble with debts. Because debt happens whenever you buy stuff you can't afford. That's what it is by definition. Now, in some cases, it's an investment. It's something that I'm going to spend this money now and hope it actually nets me more money later. And that is things like school student loans. Some cases a house. You know, most of the time it's a house, but it depends on the house. That's not an example. A car is not. A car you're going to lose money on no matter what. But, you know, if you do take out a car loan, it's usually because you're hoping that the car is going to last longer than having to buy a car and hoping it long. That's more of a gamble, really, than investment. Yeah.
Like really middle class people, as opposed to most people are in debt. My grandpa, like I hear this out in Mexico, he's like always lived middle class, like when I was little, they were like middle class and all this stuff and everything. And he just saved all his money, and now he's like loaded. He gets so much money to Fred every single year, and then gets all college money every year.
Yeah, I find there are generations like that. Generally, it's whenever you grow up and you're starting out as a young professional, whenever you're in an economic downturn or depression, you have to live within your means. So whenever things get good, you start making all this cash, you just live within your means. You don't spend more than that. So you accrue this huge amount of cash. It's kind of like, oh, I guess, well, you know, my grandfather did the same thing, and he grew up during the Great Depression. Well, he didn't trust banks. So he ended up putting all that money he had in like the mattress and places like that. Like my parents had to go. Yeah. My parents literally had to go on like a literal treasure hunt in the house after they found like $25,000 in the oven.
What did he actually drink on?
Well, there were notes because my grandfather died a pretty brutal death because he had cancer. And so
Oh, I thought you meant like you got look at a fight or something.
well,
Yeah.
actually worse than that, because to be honest, have I told you the story? I thought I must have told the first period. He had a cancer that ate through his aorta, so basically he was sitting there in the hospital waiting to be treated, and suddenly he starts vomiting buckets of blood and basically dying. My father witnessed this. It's literally one, like the description I heard from my father was like one of the worst deaths I could imagine. And so that's why you shouldn't smoke, kids. But, he left him a note saying, don't cook anything in the oven. Like, why would we cook anything in the oven? Like, we're just going to gee, Dad, well, we're
Your
gonna-
dad's over
yeah,
here.
right, we're gonna bake that turkey, and, And I was like, that's why, yeah.
My Oma, she hates paying things with a credit card, like the things she just hates it, and so growing up, raising her kids and everything, she would never pay on her card.
Mhm.
So I was paying things with cash, and one time her husband saw his couch that she really wanted, so he paid with it with their credit card, and she got so mad at him that she made him return the couch and buy with cash, he's recognized. That's just rich.
The same thing, I've heard stories, like I know a friend of mine, his grandfather always wanted a Corvette. And so he went and bought a Corvette with cash. Like not like a check. He literally had a suitcase filled with money. Like people actually do this. Yes, they do. But anyways, we're dissembling. Those are the folks who spend the most money. The aspirers, those who want to be middle class, do spend money, just not as much as the middle class, because a lot of their concern is also basic necessities. Food, water, shelter, clothes, that sort of thing. Those who are deprived are struggling to meet basic needs. Like they're not making enough money to do things like have enough food or have shelter, things like that. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, okay? Because that is the majority of Indians. The vast majority of Indians are there.
Don't like them to get married. Like I know that by the Dead Sea or something. No, not the Dead Sea. It's something like it's a sea.
The Ganges is maybe what you're thinking. That's a
Yeah,
reason.
they put the bodies in it, or the ashes.
Yep. Which is illegal.
And like
Yeah.
certain richer people living in the area.
Mhm. Yep.
That's why it's gross,
Actually,
So people bathe in it.
Yep.
But travelers and stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely true.
It's dead people.
Yeah. Which is actually illegal now. It's illegal in the cities. You're not allowed to do that. But again, in rural areas, they tend to do it
And
anyway.
it's like how.
Because that also is how you end up getting cholera.
Yeah, and there's cow whales everywhere, so it's like cow
That's
whales.
human too. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make about this is that if this is how their economy is based, then how is it advancing? How is it the sixth largest economy in the world? The answer to that is because of exportation. Whenever your exports are, you have to rely on other countries buying your crap, which is what we do. We buy stuff from everybody. But we do. We do export stuff, just not as much as we import, right? And so that would tell you something like, there must be a correlation between wealth and exports and imports. There isn't. There absolutely isn't. It used to believe that there was, but just because you're not buying something that's American doesn't mean that the economy is suffering because of what the tariffs say, because we are so intertwined with other companies. Think of it this way: how many American companies hire only folks from India to do call center work and things like that? So does that mean they're Americans? No.
Hello, she had an accent.
The funny thing is that is the number one thing British people say that no one says in Britain.
Oh my God.
No, that's I have
I
never
was
heard
thinking more
anyone say.
Australian, but British.
It's just funny. It's
And I
just
lied.
right?
But I lied.
Oh, heavens.
The tech support.
Aren't we glad we're recording this?
That one in New I never understood a word. I love that. I can't play volleyball.